Hey everyone, my name is Molly and I chose to do my final presentation on cardiovascular disease. So the reason why I chose to do cardiovascular disease is because I want to become a physical therapist and it is the leading cause of death in the United States. I work with a lot of patients that have had heart attacks before, strokes, that have variable heart conditions. So understanding CVD and how it can be prevented, I think, will help me a lot in my future career. So, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the United States, and approximately 610,000 people die each year in the US because of it, which values up to about a quarter of all the deaths in the United States. And 80% of those deaths are preventable, meaning that they are lifestyle choices such as the smoking or how active they are, poor diet, obesity, your weight. It's all lifestyle choices, and like I said, 80% of that of those deaths could have been preventable. So, 16 million people have some form of heart disease in the United States. 8 million have had a heart attack before, and 7 million have had a stroke before. So, 15 million out of 16 million people that have heart disease have already had life altering conditions. So, what is cardiovascular disease? Disease is an umbrella of terms and conditions. There's a lot of them, but the most common are heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, heart failures, arrhythmias, atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease. There's peripheral artery disease. I mean, there's so many different things. But heart disease is primarily related to atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis, if you don't know, is involved with arteriosclerosis. It's the narrowing of the arteries, the vessels, because of plaque buildup in those vessels, which increases the blood pressure. Like I said, narrows the arteries. It just completely alters the blood flow throughout your body. Heart attacks, as you know, can be because of blood clots. They could be because of electrical malfunctioning within the heart and the pacemaker cells. Strokes are primarily related to the blood clots. You're not getting enough blood flow to your brain, or it's just completely blocked off. There's heart failures, like I said, arrhythmias or murmurs. And then we kind of explained atherosclerosis already. And then there's coronary artery disease. So, risk factors. There are three primary risk factors that comes with cardiovascular disease. The primary being high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and smoking. High blood pressure is just the pressure of your blood flowing through your veins, your arteries. It's just too much to handle. It stresses and strains your musculature within your vessels. High cholesterol is just that plaque buildup. You're getting too much cholesterol within your blood, and it starts to sit around around the valves in your vessels, which is not very good. It can lead to blood clots. And then smoking, like I said. There are other important factors: diabetes, obesity, poor diets, not being physically active, excessive alcohol use, and stress, which we will all get to. Diabetes is primarily kind of related to, you're obviously not taking care of your body or having too much sugar in your blood, which leads to your body basically not using its insulin properly, if at all. So you have to take insulin injections. Obesity, a lot of it's related to diabetes, obviously, and poor diet. So you're not eating enough HDLs, you're having too much cholesterol, your high blood pressure is increasing, and then stress, which we will get to here fairly shortly. So smoking is actually the cause of every 1 in 4 deaths from cardiovascular disease. And crazy enough, even smoking less than 5 cigarettes a day can show early signs of CVD. But fortunately, cutting definitely cuts those risks that you get with smoking. So if you quit within a year, you have a dramatic reduction in those risks. And crazy enough, within 5 years, if you haven't smoked, you've reduced your risk of having a stroke to an individual that's basically never even had a stroke before. So if you do smoke, please consider quitting. Stress is a huge contributor to CVD. If you can remember back to the videos that we have had to watch over this course, you can hopefully remember that stress basically initiates the endocrine responses of epinephrine and glucocorticoids within your blood. It increases your blood pressure as well. And multiple studies, specifically this one that I found, people with anxiety have had increased risk of cardiovascular mortality, strokes, heart failures, and then people with depression have an increase of coronary artery disease. So mental health is a huge component, and it's you really need to take care of yourself. Genetics, unfortunately, is another factor. So as I said before, 80% of cardiovascular deaths could have been preventable because of lifestyle choices, but genetics kind of has those other 20 other percent here. So race, unfortunately, African Americans have the greatest risk of cardiovascular disease because they do have the highest blood pressure in the world, and obesity rates are through the roof. If I can remember correctly, it was 63% of men and 77% of women that are African American are either overweight or obese. And then gender. If you are a woman, you actually have a decreased risk of acquiring CVD up until actually later in your life because estrogen luckily protects us women from acquiring CVD. So prevention. Prevention is a huge thing. Knowing your family history is one of the biggest components to prevention. Knowing if your family has history of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking habits, addictions, being overweight or obese. Knowing your family history is absolutely essential to knowing your risk of CVD. And then risk assessments. They are becoming increasingly popular throughout the medical professional community. Risk assessments include questions about your age, your gender, your weight, your ethnicity, obviously, what your blood cholesterol is, what your blood pressure is, what are your diet choices, what are you eating, what are you putting into your body, and how active are you being? Are you meeting those guidelines that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services have given us Americans? So physical activity, like I said, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services puts out every several years new recommendations upon research and studies that the medical community has done. So for children ages 6 to 17, they recommend that they're getting a physical activity for at least an hour per day and primarily targeting that hour to aerobic activity. So making sure that they're just running around, getting that heart rate up and working your cardiovascular system because they are muscles and muscles need to be trained as well, which brings me to strength training. Not necessarily like hitting the gym and pumping as much weight as you can, but just using those muscles to increase their bone density and decrease those muscle fibers so that they can have a healthier lifestyle. And they recommend that they do that 3 times a week. For us adults, they have this in minutes, but I chose to do this in hours, so it's a little bit easier for us to understand. Basically, they recommend that 2.5 to 5 hours a week should be directed towards moderate intensity workouts, or about an hour to 2.5 hours of vigorous intensity aerobic activity a week. Like I said before, working that cardiovascular system, getting your heart rate up, making you breathe a little bit heavier really helps us work out. And then 2 to 3 times a week should be focused towards strength training. So what can be done? Public awareness is very essential. It is the #1 leading cause of death in the United States. So being aware of cardiovascular disease and our own risks, our family risks, is essential to promoting this and to knowing what our risks are. So making the public aware is very important. It is the #1 leading cause of death, so we need to put a stop to it. We need to make a change within society, making sure that we are taking care of one another and taking care of ourselves. Risk assessments, we kind of went over this a little bit. It can be very essential to our physicians and ourselves. So be honest with your doctors. Let them know what your lifestyle really is like so that they can give you a more accurate representation of what your risks truly are so that you can be around much longer in your life. And then being active, eating healthy, and please don't smoke. If you do smoke, consider quitting. And then these are my references. So thanks for kind of listening to my TED Talk, and have a good weekend, guys. Thanks.